This is Washington Post Live, bringing in the heavy hitters to now talk about DC United. We're here with Jason Lockenfor, Mike Wise of the Washington Post, and The Voice. The Voice. You like that nickname, actually, don't you, Dave?
I like it when you say it.
When I say it
specifically. In fact, I may start just hiring you, putting on my full messages, because you say it with a certain eloquence.
The Voice. Just keep it like that.
Yeah.
The Voice.
Can we move on now, guys?
I thought he was on to something.
Some mutual admiration society going on.
Let's go inside the Post newsroom and say hello to Steve Goff. Steve, I understand you have some breaking news. What do you have for us?
Breaking news. It's so fresh. It hasn't even hit the blogs yet.
Well, hit me then. Let's hear it on Washington Post Live.
Breaking news.
Breaking news. USA World Cup qualifier, October, I think it's 11th. They're going to play Cuba at RFK Stadium, and that's all set. So international soccer returns to RFK this fall, and as long as U.S. and Cuba both advance in their second round matchups this summer, then they will definitely face each other in Washington in middle of October.
Well, Steve, Jason Lockenfor just put up 2 thumbs up, so I know he's happy. Locke, what do you got for
I hope it's an afternoon start so I can bring Chloe. That's
Not
all.
likely. I think it's a weekday game.
Oh, like the Panama game.
I think so. I haven't checked yet. It's either a Saturday or a Wednesday.
I'll keep her up. Load her up with caffeine.
Stephen, hey, we know that DC United's going to take on Real Salt Lake tomorrow. They've started off slow, kind of like they did last year, but how much does the CONCACAF play have a lot to do with their struggles in MLS?
It has a lot to do with it, just because of the schedule. It's great these MLS teams are playing international competition, but to be honest, they don't have the rosters to compete and play a league game on the weekend and then play in a major international game during the week. I mean, teams in Mexico and obviously teams in Europe can do that because the rosters are so deep with talent. But in MLS, they can't do that, so it's really unfair to put these teams in that position. I think the league really shortchanged their teams by not giving them a break early in the season and dropping some of these regular season games to later in the year. It was an impossible situation, and now you see it taking its toll because DC United was a worn-out team. They didn't play well last week. They got crushed at Real Salt Lake the week before. Finally, now they've kind of caught their breath and seem to have got back on track. Obviously, we'll see how they perform tomorrow night.
Well, he makes a good point because that's the Houston coach, as you know, Steve, Dominic Kinnear said the same thing. That they've gone through struggles there. They're defending champions, and Commissioner Don Garber, of course, wants the Major League Soccer teams to do well in these competitions because there's a big carrot at the end of all this. If they can somehow get all the way to the World Club Championship, and there's a lot of money. But as you talked about, when this happens in Europe or other places, you're talking about rosters of 25 or sometimes 50 players, whereas United and MLS teams, you're talking about 18 to 25. And so it is a big challenge. It handicaps them. And I think further for DC United's point is they made adjustments in key areas in the offseason. So you compound the schedule with the fact that you've got a new central midfielder, Marcelo Gallardo, and you change essentially the spine of the team with new central defenders. So I think they've had a double whammy going on there.
Yeah, it's just kind of interesting how for a tournament this summer, the Superliga, which pits MLS teams against Mexican teams, and MLS has a financial stake in it, they cleared the schedule, no problem. That was not an issue. Nothing's really at stake in that tournament. It's just for marketing purposes, a little bit of money is at stake. That's about it. But the Champions Cup sends a team to the World Championships, but MLS felt that wasn't important enough to help out their own teams with the scheduling. That was definitely
warranted. A warranted shot. Not like Mike Wise, who comes off half-cocked.
No, you're right, Steve. You know my soccer knowledge. What's a CONCACAF? It sounds like something supersized at Starbucks.
Yeah, you got that right. That's where the name came from.
That's a good line,
It came from Starbucks, and it's a long name. It means nothing. I try to use it in print as little as possible. I just call it the regional Confederation, which oversees North America, Central America, the Caribbean. They changed their name a few years ago to I think it was the Football Confederation, and it just never caught on. So they went back to CONCACAF, and I'll continue to ignore it.
And where did you get the news of Cuba? I want to say, I think I know your source.
Yeah, you probably do. We had U.S. coach Bob Bradley in the office with us today. He met with reporters and editors of the Post. He's in town for meetings tomorrow. He'll also be at RFK tomorrow just to keep an eye on some of the possible U.S. players who will be playing in the MLS game. We pinned him in a corner. We threatened him. And he gave us the news that if indeed these teams advance, it'll be U.S. Cuba at RFK this fall.
But to be fair, Steve has always been breaking news. I mean, for 20 years, this guy has been telling us what's coming to RFK first.
Yeah, there you go. We thought it was I thought it was going to be the September qualifier, probably against Trinidad. It made sense because the U.S. was going to play in Cuba, and it would have been easy for them to get to Cuba right to Washington and play Trinidad a few days later. But as it turns out, that game will be somewhere else, perhaps Chicago. And then they're going to play in Washington in October, and that leaves a game in November, which my guess is will be somewhere out west, maybe Denver or Los Angeles.
Steve, it's funny you mentioned Bradley, because I was going to ask you about the national team regardless, just that now that we're kind of finally creeping closer to qualification again.
Yeah.
And Germany seems like a pretty long way back.
Yeah.
Did you get a sense from Bradley any young kids on the horizon that he's particularly excited about for the early stages of qualifying?
Well, he's a very measured guy. I mean, he's very careful about what he says, and obviously he's very high on Freddie Adu. But I asked him, how would you assess Freddie at this point, and he said incomplete. And the reason being, yes, he's done well at the under-23 team, and he helped them qualify for the Olympics, and he showed good things on the national team, but he's not playing that much in Portugal, so thus his response of incomplete. Obviously, they're very high on Josie Altidore, who's a big-time talent, and is going to play in the Olympics this year, and is going to be part of the national team for a long time. And we see some other young players who are coming up through the European system and through MLS. So I can't give you any specific names. They like Brad Guzan, the goalie, a lot, who I think you'll see on these qualifying rosters. And we'll see how these guys progress over the next 6 months to a year.
Is his son going to Everton? Where do you think his son ends up?
I don't know. That's a good question. And he doesn't like talking about his son.
Yeah.
It's really uncomfortable for him. We did talk a little bit about his son when the family lived here in the Washington area, and how Michael played his youth soccer in the Washington area. And clearly his experience here in D.C. led him to become a 20-goal scorer in Europe this year. So, beyond that, it's hard to say, but there's a pretty good chance Michael Bradley will head to England or Germany, or a step above the Dutch league where he is right now.
Jason should start every question, Steve, now with, are there any more 14-year-olds I can fawn over?
Hey, Steve, let's talk about tomorrow's game. What's going to be really the key for DC United to get a win over Real Salt Lake?
Tomorrow, yeah, I mean, I think player for player, talent-wise, DC is a far superior team, but of course we saw in Salt Lake City that doesn't translate to a victory. DC's just got to pressure. They got to widen the field a little. They tend to play down the middle too much, and they just got to get an early goal. Luciano Emilio, a guy I'm writing about in tomorrow's paper, has really struggled. He has a couple goals, but he's missed a lot of chances, and that really affects this team, especially when those chances come early in the game and can really set the tone for the match. So, I would expect DC to win, but given, their history early season, who knows? And certainly Salt Lake has some confidence after beating DC so handily just 2 weeks ago.
Well, Steve, I trust your soccer knowledge a lot more than mine. I'll just tell you this, my key tomorrow, I need Ben Olsen in my life. I need him back. Can you just get him out there as soon as possible?
He'll be
please?
Watching from the mezzanine level. His ankle is not too good. He's getting another examination next week in Carolina, but it's going to take a while, and we'll see. One interesting thing, the game tomorrow night, they're looking at 25,000 at RFK, so it's going to be quite a scene, I think, at the old ballpark.
Well, we're looking forward to it. Steve Goff reporting from the Post newsroom with breaking news and giving us a 411 on all things DC United. Steve, thanks so much. Enjoy the game tomorrow.
You got it. Thanks.
All right. Hey. this is the time of the show where we promo what we're getting ready to do tomorrow, because we can do that, right?
Yes, you can.
Comcast Sportsnet is your home for DC United. The rematch with Real Salt Lake begins at 7 right here on Comcast Sportsnet. By the way, you will hear the soulful sounds of the voice. Dave Johnson. Wow. Step aside now and get prepared for sports night. Pulling double duty today. I like it.
Just needed a break. I thought I'd stop by.
That's all you need.
Yeah, that's
DJ, we appreciate the time. Coming up a little bit later here on Washington Post Live, Tracy McGrady in the playoffs in the first round.